Oh, Steve.
Hey!
I'm here, Papa.
Now it's a good particular.
The movie begins by showing the main character living a fancy life. He flies a helicopter to a snowy mountain to ski, drives fancy cars, does sports, and goes on dates while flying his own plane. Then we see the main character, Pharaoh, going into a building to talk business with his assistant Lawrence. He quickly talks to a rival on the phone and tells Lawrence to buy 5,000 shares of a company for $60 million. There's a meeting waiting for Pharaoh, but he tells Lawrence to handle it. Next, Pharaoh goes to a pool party where he talks to a blonde and hangs out with a friendly couple. His mother calls and says his father is sick and wants to see him. Pharaoh finds himself on a plane reflecting on his life. He was born in Italy but moved to America and became successful. His father worries that Pharaoh won't find true love because he's surrounded by money and women. Pharaoh arrives at his parents' house and talks to his mom, who warns him that his father doesn't have much time left. He goes to see his father, and they have some final words. His father's last request is for Pharaoh to go away for a month with no money, using a different name and without using his power or influence. Pharaoh agrees, and his father dies shortly after. Pharaoh says goodbye to his mother and tells Lawrence he'll be gone for 30 days. He trades his driver's license for a chauffeur's license and lands in New York with just one bag. He tries to get a job at a pizza place but gets rejected. He goes to a bar and starts talking to a blonde, calling himself Claude and not revealing anything about his real life. She's not interested and leaves, but a chubby brunette named Peta takes her place. She isn't as impressive as the blonde, but she's nice. Pharaoh tells her he doesn't have a place to sleep, so Peta offers to let him stay at her place. When they get there, they find another woman sleeping on the couch. Peta doesn't explain who she is and sends Pharaoh straight to her bedroom. Later, she joins him wearing sexy clothes, ready to kiss him. Pharaoh lies and says he's gay to avoid getting intimate. Later that night, Peta snores loudly, keeping Pharaoh awake. He goes to the living room and stares at the other girl, waking her up. She gets scared, and both women kick him out. Pharaoh walks on the streets and gets attacked by two thugs. He fights them off and climbs a fire escape to escape. The thugs lose him, but a woman sees him and calls the police, thinking he's a peeping Tom. The police arrest Pharaoh, but they let him go the next morning when they find out his story checks out and the thugs were arrested. Meanwhile, Diane walks on the streets and feels like she's being followed. Flashbacks show a man attacking her. She runs to her mother's house for safety. Her mother tries to set her up with someone, but Diane isn't interested. Pharaoh spends the night sleeping on a park bench with only 50 cents in his pocket. He tries to buy a hot dog but doesn't have enough money. The vendor gives him a hot dog for free. While crossing the street, Pharaoh gets hit by a courier van. The driver, Fred, helps him and they talk. Pharaoh mentions he's looking for a job, and Fred says one of his clients needs a chauffeur. They go to meet Curtis, who hires Pharaoh for various tasks, including bartending. Pharaoh works hard serving guests and washing dishes, feeling out of his element. At the end of the night, Curtis has him drive a guest home. Pharaoh calls Lawrence and instructs him to give a bonus to every employee. This experience teaches Pharaoh the value of hard work. When Pharaoh returns to his room, Curtis's wife, Kat, is waiting for him. Nancy, Curtis's daughter, also knocks on his door, and Kat hides under the bed. And Nancy enters, trying to be intimate with Pharaoh. Now Curtis himself knocks on the door, and Nancy hides in the closet. Curtis tries to charm Pharaoh, but Pharaoh says he has a contagious condition to push him away. Curtis leaves, followed by Nancy. Eventually, Pharaoh and Kat are alone in the room. The next day, Pharaoh drives Curtis to his company building and sees Diane again. She acts distant towards him, forcing Pharaoh to leave. 3 days later, Pharaoh sends her flowers without a card or message. Shortly after, Curtis calls Diane, claiming he forgot his briefcase in the building. He makes her bring it to him in a taxi, despite her objections about having to go to a funeral. Diane reluctantly brings the briefcase to Curtis's house and encounters Pharaoh once more. Curtis tells Pharaoh to drive Diane wherever she wants. In the car, Pharaoh and Diane formally introduce themselves. Pharaoh apologizes for the incident at Peter's house and admits he sent the flowers. He suggests going to the funeral together and then getting coffee. At the funeral, they find solace in each other's company, even finding humor in the goofy priest. Afterward, they have coffee together. Diane clarifies that it's not a date, but she feels comfortable around Pharaoh and opens up. She shares that her husband died in the Iraqi War. As time passes, Pharaoh drives Diane home, and they discuss the Curtis family. Diane mentions she's looking for a new job agency. They arrive at Diane's parents' house and share a kiss, which Diane's parents witness from the window. Pharaoh and Diane agree to meet on their next day off for a proper date. A few days later, Diane's day off is cancelled, but Pharaoh doesn't let that stop him. He accompanies her to check out apartments assigned to her by Curtis. Nancy visits her father's office and informs Curtis that Pharaoh tried to flirt with her in her room. Curtis lays it out on Pharaoh and fires him. Diane, fed up, asks Curtis why he has to be so mean to everyone. Curtis calls Diane, and she resigns from her job. Pharaoh and Diane leave the building together, and Pharaoh tells her what really happened at Curtis's house that night. Diane asks where he's going to stay now, but it's not a problem because Pharaoh got paid. Diane invites Pharaoh to dinner with her parents, and he accepts. The dinner turns out to be awkward. Diane's parents ask Pharaoh, whom they met as Claude, questions about his life. They're disappointed when they realize Pharaoh's future isn't quite right. It gets worse when he tells them he was fired that day and dragged Diane down with him. Diane has to set her parents straight, and they continue eating. When Diane and Pharaoh leave, Diane's parents comment that Pharaoh has good manners but seemed like he hadn't eaten in a month. Walking and eating ice cream, Diane tells Pharaoh she'd rather be alone than with her parents, but that's a story for another time. Diane talks to Peta, telling her she's dating Pharaoh while he gathers his stuff from Curtis's house. Pharaoh and Diane get back together, and he suggests they look for a job together. But Diane has another idea and asks Pharaoh to be her partner so they can start their own real estate agency. She says she has some savings they can use, and Pharaoh admires her willingness to take the risk. Pharaoh can't forget his old business tricks and offers Diane better strategies, which she gladly accepts. To celebrate, they go out for dinner and have a couple of cocktails. They discuss their company, trying to find a suitable name for it. Then they dance to the music. When they return to their room, they start kissing, but Diane won't go any further. Pharaoh asks her why. Diane initially doesn't want to talk about it, but Pharaoh convinces her she can trust him, and she changes her mind. Diane shares that when her husband passed away, she wanted to know his last moments and if he said anything. She made calls and met a man who claimed to be with her husband when he died. However, he assaulted her, bringing back painful memories. Pharaoh comforts her. Diane starts her new business, and it's doing well. She talks with Pharaoh, who mentions he'll have to go back to California soon. Diane isn't happy about it. Pharaoh gets a moment alone and talks on the phone with Lawrence. Lawrence informs him that Olivetti Enterprises are in trouble because Pharaoh's rival made a generous offer to buy their shares. Lawrence advises Pharaoh to show up at the hearing to win. Pharaoh flies to California and attends the hearing, successfully regaining control of his company. He returns to New York and goes back to the realty company offices. Kat unexpectedly kisses Pharaoh, causing a misunderstanding between him and Diane, leading to their relationship falling apart. Pharaoh's 30-day challenge ends, and he returns to California without getting a chance to talk to Diane. But he doesn't give up easily. He goes back to New York and knocks on Diane's door. They talk and explain themselves, spending a wonderful night together. Pharaoh asks Diane to move to California with him, and she agrees. When they land, Pharaoh explains everything to Diane, revealing his true identity. Diane sees a kind man in Pharaoh's face, noting how he treats his employees like friends. At the end of the movie, Diane mentions she needs to find a job. But Pharaoh has a different idea. He wants to share everything with Diane because it's the first time he's experienced true love. Diane asks if this is his way of proposing, and it is. They get married and live happily ever after. The movie concludes with the married couple and guests leaving the church, illustrating that while money can buy many things, it can't buy true love.